Welcome back to the Other Side of 45's podcast. I'm your host, Randy Black. This podcast is about taking chances, owning my mistakes, addressing generational family trauma and curses, completing my 50s by 50 list, and my life as a single empty nester. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Please subscribe and rate this podcast 5 stars. Now, hopefully you've noticed I've not loaded an episode in 2 weeks. I had to address some personal issues and couldn't concentrate on creating content. Although I'm still addressing these issues, I'm ready to get back to creating podcasts. So this episode will post on Mother's Day. So this is my special Mother's Day episode. I want to wish all other mothers in my life a happy Mother's Day. And I want to talk a little bit about the mothers in my life. So I'll start with the first one that I met. And no, it sounds so formal. Which is my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Jackson. My great-grandmother was alive when I was born. And I don't really remember much about her. She was bedridden when I was a child. What I remember is that all her children would travel from their homes outside of South Carolina to see her. My great-grandmother lived with my great-aunt, who's my grandmother's sister on my mother's side. And we would have our family reunions at my great-aunt's house because my great-grandmother couldn't travel. And that's how I saw my great-aunts, uncles, and cousins. Oh, I just remember the aunts would cook the best soul food, and we in my aunt's kitchen, or my grandmother sometimes. My grandmother doesn't live that far from her sister, and sometimes some of them would go to my grandmother's house, others would stay at my great-aunt's house. But honey, when they brought that food together, oh my gosh, it was so delicious. Then we children would play outside with our cousins that we saw maybe once a year. And these family reunions would last a few days and well into the night. We would roast marshmallows and hot dogs in my aunt's front yard. Cousins would be everywhere, in the house, in the basement, front, backyards. Now, as an adult, I can only imagine how much my aunt had to do to prepare for us invading her space. I am so grateful that she continued to do that. Now, after my great-grandmother passed, the reunions became few and far between. And I'll have to do another episode on what happened to stop the reunions. I didn't learn much about great-grandmother. I didn't talk to her. I wish one in the family would have thought to document her life. And I'm pretty sure there are pictures of her that I can share with the family. And all I have to share are facts that I found when tracing our family tree. At least that's something, though. So, to my great-grandmother, who I knew very little about, happy Mother's Day. Now, a few weeks ago, I spoke to my grandmother. She is my mother's sister. My mother's mother, who I love dearly. But I was talking to her, and I've mentioned this in a previous episode that I'm tracing my family tree. And I had gone as far as I could with one branch. So I'm on the phone with grandmother, and I tell her about tracing the family tree, which she has been told, but her memory's not that great. So sometimes when I talk to her, I have to remind her of stuff that we've talked about in the past. Then in the past, she seemed uninterested. But on this particular conversation, I needed to talk to her about what I found and make sure that what I found was correct. Because when I talked to her previously and I asked her for her grandparents' names, she couldn't remember. So after some digging, I had found what I thought was her great-grandmother, which she probably was the last enslaved member of our family. She was born right at 1865, but just before the slavery had ended. So if I'm getting my dates correct, I don't have the information in front of me, but I know she probably was the last enslaved member of our family. And I found her. So I was calling Grandma because, like I said, when I talked to her previously, she couldn't remember her great-grandparents' names. And I thought, okay, give her a name, maybe it will ring a bell. So I called her and I told her, and she said, you know what? Yeah, I remember that name. And I was like, this is it. I mean, everything that I had found led to this probably being her. But if you can remember, if you've heard some of my previous podcasts, sometimes the census information wasn't always correct. Um, my ancestors, most of them that far away, had minimal education. Like I think my great grandfather, I don't know how many grades there are, to be honest with you, had like a fourth grade education. So dates and times and stuff, they didn't always know because they had limited education. But back then, the census taker just took whatever they told them. So sometimes I would find a record and the dates, years would vary a little bit, but when you looked at the people were the same, but the dates were different. So the further back you go, the more discrepancies you have. And so it gets a little dicey to make sure that the information that you have is indeed from your line. That's all I got to say about that. Anyway, so back to talking to grandma about this. So I told her name and she's like, yeah, that sounds familiar. That sounds like my great grandmother's name. And so I was like, oh my gosh. So I tell her what I found and that I've gone this far. And I tell her, I was like, Grandma, I really, I told her the name that I found of the family that probably was the one who owned my family. And I know the plantation's name, which now that I am confident about, that I know the plantation that my family grew up on. And so I gave her that information, and you guys, like when I tell you what she said gave me goosebumps. Now I'm not reciting word for word what grandma said, but this is what she said. She said, when you find all the information, please share it with me. I want to know. Now, oh my gosh, when I tell you I wanted to cry, because I had started this with my sibling years ago and nobody seemed interested. So to hear her say, please tell me, I want to know, oh my gosh, it just did everything to me. And it could be that now my grandmother, who has lost all of her siblings, is someone, my great aunt that I was telling you guys about, they're the only two left. That may be why my grandmother wants to know. And when I told her I had gone as far back as I could and I really needed to get the records from the family that owned our family, and I needed a South Carolina library card, and she asked me about getting it. So I said, Grandma, they're free, like you can just go and get one. And my grandmother actually lives very close to the library in her hometown, and she said, I'll get one so that you can dig a little deeper. So I am just excited that she's on board, and I wish I could have given her as a Mother's Day gift or her birthday gift. Now, FYI, my grandmother's birthday is May 7th, which is the day before Mother's Day. So I was like, if I could have gotten this sooner and been able to finish this family tree sooner, it would have been a great Mother's Day or a birthday gift from my grandmother. But oh my gosh, there's no way I could have finished it in time, because it was very recent, and to search is a lot of work. Then I thought, well, maybe Juneteenth is coming up, but you know what? I'm just not going to put that kind of pressure on myself. Ultimately, as long as she gets the family tree, that's just the goal. So I'm going to work on that, and I'm going to have to probably call her and remind her about this library card thing. But I want to give this to her as a gift. And she doesn't know this, but the gift that she gave to me this Mother's Day, even though it was a couple weeks ago, is that she wants me to continue. So thank you, Grandma, because I will continue and I will get that information for you. And another thing that I want to do besides tracing our family tree is I want to record her talking about her past so that we will have that to pass on to future generations. Now, my grandmother's the oldest living member of our family, and I'm not sure she's ready for that, but I'm going to ask her. My grandmother has held our families together for years. She's kind and calm, and she's a soft place to fall. When I think of her, I'm reminded of sitting on her front porch, swatting flies, bugs, mosquitoes, and oh my God, she has so many mosquitoes. It's like she's breeding mosquitoes. There's so many mosquitoes. So we just sit on her porch trying to survive the attacks of the flyings. And we talk about everything and nothing. She makes the best freaking homemade lemonade, which lemonade is my favorite drink. Yes, it is. She's sassy and will say whatever's on her mind. And I'm grateful that I have a good relationship with her and that my children know their great grandmother. Mrs. Meta Hatcher, happy birthday. Happy Mother's Day to one of the best grandmothers a grandchild could have. Now, my paternal grandmother, Jerodine, passed away shortly after I graduated high school. I wish I had spent more time with her. She was loving and tried to have a relationship with me and my siblings, but it was complicated. And I miss her, and I wish she had met my daughters. She was an excellent cook, and she did whatever she could to spoil us. So, to my late grandmother, Jerodine, happy Mother's Day. We miss you. My mother and I do not have a relationship today. It's been years since I've spoken to my mother. And we never really had a good mother-daughter relationship. And it was difficult because I grew up knowing that she didn't love me. And that's something that she's proud of, and we've addressed that before. But she tried. It just wasn't something that came natural for her. And that's okay, because she did what she had to do, and I'm here, so I'm grateful. And I do have some fond memories of my mother. Like I said, she tried. Remember that silly little name game song, Who Stole the Cookie Out of the Cookie Jar? I'm not going to recite it because I do find it quite annoying. But anyway, I remember Mother would play or sing or whatever you want to call it, this little game with us, and it was fun. And she did those kind of things when we were kids, and I'll probably do that kind of stuff if I become a grandmother. Then Mother sang these little silly songs and played silly games with her grandchildren, my children, and my nephew. And she loves her grandchildren. And my children are fortunate to have a good relationship with her. And I'm grateful that she has and is there for my children. And they will have memories of her that will last a lifetime. So to my mother, happy Mother's Day. And thank you for literally everything. I usually send out the mothers in my life a Mother's Day card. And this year I decided not to send cards. And I'm rethinking how to stay connected to the people in my life. And this might be me overthinking things. But the last thing I want to do is burning people with cards and handcrafted gifts. So I started sending cards a few years ago to let people in my life know that I'm thinking of them and to communicate with them now, instead of regretting it when they are no longer on this side of the death certificate. But since then, my mind has gone in many different directions, and I'm not sure if this is something I should continue. So if you're my friend who supports my podcast and is used to getting a Mother's Day card from me, please know that I didn't send them this year. I'm not sure. I sent a bunch of cards out during Easter, like 20 cards during Easter. My major holidays like Easter, Christmas and stuff, I sent out more cards than specialized days. So my Mother's Day list is usually about 15 to 20 cards. But ladies, happy Mother's Day. And I see you, and you're doing a great job. When I thought about doing this Mother's Day episode, it was before the Supreme Court leaked opinion, and I was conflicted about whether I should include that in this episode. And after bouncing the idea off my children and doing some soul searching, I knew I had to say something, because this podcast is about who I am today. So I'm going to talk about it. So as you know, I was in a cult that taught, of course, that abortions were against God's will. Admittedly, abortions didn't come up a lot in my life. When I found out I was pregnant, I was excited and ready to be a mother. And I didn't have to face the decision of what to do with an unwanted pregnancy. It wasn't until I had my daughters and expanded my life to include people and thoughts that were outside of what I've known that abortions were more than just what I taught. It had become a conversation. Now, I know a lot of mothers who struggle to conceive, mothers who struggle to raise children, mothers who were impregnated as children by relatives and friends of the family, mothers who gave birth to stillborns, mothers who adopted children. I mean, the list goes on and on. I know a lot of different types of women who became mothers and how. The one thing that they didn't need when they were making these decisions were other people's opinions. This their bodies, their choices, their life. If you don't know if you didn't know where I stood, now you know. After being free from the cult where I was told how to live my life, I would never force my opinions on someone else, and I would never agree with any law, anything where somebody else's opinion affects somebody else's life. Your personal opinion shouldn't affect my life. It has nothing to do with you. Because the bottom line is, if you don't want to have an abortion, then don't. But you don't get the right to tell me, somebody else, that I can't. So stay in your lane. And telling women what to do with their bodies isn't your lane. This is just one of the many reasons that my family and I are preparing to leave the United States and to relocate to another country. This decision was made after the 2016 election. I didn't like the direction this country was heading, and I had decided that once the girls had graduated from college that would be on the agenda, the plan to leave. I'm not going to share anything more about that. I'm going to get back on subject. So Mother's Day isn't always an easy day for everyone. There are those who will be unable to celebrate because their mother is no longer with them. There are those who don't want to celebrate because their mother was not a good mother. But for those of us who have mothers and others we love and want to honor, happy Mother's Day. And to the two beautiful people that bring joy to my life, I love you for making me a mother. Being their mother is the only Mother's Day gift I will ever need. Now, I've posted some pictures of both of my grandmothers and my mother on Instagram. And so if you want to see what they look like, go ahead over to the Other Side 45's Instagram. And these women are the women that made me who I am today. And I want them to know I love them and thank them. Without their influence, my life wouldn't be just fine. Like the lyrics from the theme song of my life by my sister, Mary J. Blige. I like what I see when I'm looking at me, when I'm walking past the mirror. Don't stretch through the night at a time in my life. Ain't worried about if you feel it. Got my head on straight. I got my vibe right. I ain't gonna let you kill it. You see, I wouldn't change my life. My life's just fine. Happy Mother's Day, ladies. Meet me on the Other Side of 45's the podcast website and Instagram. New episodes will release usually every Monday. Except for today, this special Mother's Day episode. Thank you for tuning in. Please rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so others can find it. It helps me grow my podcast. Your feedback and support is greatly appreciated.